Coming to you from the dining room table at East Barbary Lane, welcome to a special episode of Full Circle, the podcast. A visit to our home where we usually squeeze a few headlines through our decidedly queer lens and see what happens. But today we'll be talking to writer, artist, and overall storyteller Juliany Taveras. Juliany, welcome to the Full Circle table.
So much. I'm so excited to be here with y'all again.
I wasn't here last time. Y'all spoke. And before we get into why you're back, because there's an actual reason beyond you're really fun to talk to. You know, I wanted to just start mentioning that I listened to the episode from October this morning, and I took a few notes. And I just wanted to start with those.
Okay.
Because I loved the idea of ancestrally inhabiting time and space differently. It was such a gorgeous way. You are a wordsmith, which I adore, by the way.
Yeah.
Anyone who can just work with words and paint a rich canvas with them, I am there.
Yes.
Or how all the other ways we describe that we do. Some of us do just inhabit this world differently and experience it differently. And I loved that play with words. I also like the idea of children are medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a great idea. What a great concept, because they really are. You all kind of talked about making space for grace. So I just want to leave it there. I didn't get to talk about the play that you wrote. I believe it launched. It was October and November. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, it's October through November
Okay.
in Minneapolis. Yeah, it was the world premiere.
Okay. And what has happened recently with that work?
Recently, the play Morris Micklewhite and Tangerine Dress, which I was really honored to be the playwright of, based on the children's novel of the same name by Christine Baldacchino and Isabel Malafont. Shout out to them. We got to meet Christine at the premiere. That was super fun. But recently, the
Nice.
play won the 2024 Distinguished Play Award for adaptations of children's lit from the American Alliance of Theater and Education, and that was really exciting.
We are finger snapping right now.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
That's amazing. Tell me what that means.
Yeah, I was really excited because, especially specifically, the American Alliance for Theater and Education is at that, right, as is in the name, is at that intersection of two things that I am really passionate about and think are really important for all ages, theater and education. And before I was getting commissioned to write a play for the first time, which was what Morris Micklewhite was for me, I was a teaching artist all over New York City. And so it was just really amazing to get that email because there's kind of when you think about what matters to you, what kind of recognition or awards matter to you as an artist, right? Of course, everyone thinks of the big stuff, and not to say that those aren't cool, if you make it to Broadway or get a Tony or something like that. But for me, the first time that one of my plays was done in a high school, I was like, I've peaked. This is what I love. This is what matters really at my core to me. And so it was kind of like that, where the American Alliance for Theater Education is working at that intersection, uplifting, even having a category, right, for an adaptation of a children's book, right, for that audience. Pretty specific, pretty niche award, but I'm so proud of it and so honored because that is what to me is a huge part of what's at the heart of my work as an artist is. Thinking about theater in that larger sense of storytelling in that ancient way, as long as we've been around, I think we've circled up and told stories and live in that way. And then of course, education and that aspect of really pouring into education, which I think, if we look at in the States, at least around us and probably in many countries, but I know where I am, I'm we need a lot more attention and funding and investing into education and the art and education for young people. It's such formative years. So yeah, I was just
You're here. Yeah, you remember going into schools and bringing art there? Do you remember that, Charles, in the early 90s?
Yeah,
when there was money?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, back when there was
Back when
money.
there was a little,
money.
when there was a crumb. And I remember, right, as a kid in public schools, like those were huge. Even if it was like a group that came in for a week and I never saw them again, changed my life. Like changed my life for sure.
Right.
So I was honored to be that for other young people when I was a teaching artist, all over New York. And I hope to still do work like that in the future. But in the meantime, it's so special that the work I'm writing is getting to connect with young people across the country, which is really exciting, and older people, all ages, always.
Yeah.
And I know as an artist, any recognition for the work we do is like, oh, because it's like, the thing I'm doing it for a reason, and you believe me too.
Yes. No, literally, exactly. Someone was asking me that day, and I was like, it really was that where I was like, okay, affirmation. Okay, I should keep going. Like, I
Uh-huh.
shouldn't just give in to the like little mean voices that are like, it doesn't matter, nothing. Like, what's the point? Those voices are real, especially, when there is less money for the arts and, a intense economy and political landscape. It can really be easy to start feeling like, is this really the thing that I need to be doing right now? Like, is this the most important
Mhm.
thing? Like, is it even matters? Is it even having an impact? And my whole life has been a constant spiral return to like, yes, calm down, friend. Like, it matters. Like, it matters. This work matters. It matters to you, and it matters to other people. So it definitely felt that way to get. And I'm really excited because they're
Maybe
gonna.
my whole life
Maybe
isn't a lie.
that. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm onto something. Maybe I'm on my path, and I need to stop doubting myself at every turn.
Right. I mean, we are always our worst critics as artists, and that's just always going to be true. I think it's also what makes the art good when it's good, and it's what makes it resonate. I think
Right.
so. Yeah, it's this double-edged sword.
Totally.
Tell me a little bit about the play. Of all the things that you could have started with, and of course, congratulations. But tell me about it. Why this story? Why now? Why was it important?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So like I mentioned, it's an adaptation of a book, and the children's book of the same name, Morris Micklewhite, Tangerine Dress, is so stunning. I dream still of writing my own children's book at some point, on the list of things, that we want to do to put out into
Do
the
it.
world.
Do it.
And so it's been really special to get to adapt, because it also was not my first time adapting a children's book. I'd actually, when I started adapting Morris, I was already in the process of adapting Julian is a Mermaid, which is another beautiful children's book, for the screen,
Oh,
for
yeah.
animation. And so that was already super special and really close to my heart in terms of the story. And then Morris actually has really similar themes to that book, and so it felt cool to like that this work was the work that I was attracting, was these children's books that are really exploring. I think we could very much and should talk about it in our current context as like exploring gender and exploring gender expression and gender identity, and I think that's very much true and important to say, and at the same time saying more largely like it's just about like these stories that say like we are all alive and that is the miracle of it all, and like this child sure has short hair, happens to be named Morris, assigned male at birth, what have you, and loves this dress. Like the tangerine dress is fire. Like it's the best thing he's ever seen. Like, and he loves it because it sounds really cool and it crinkles and it reminds him of his mom's hair. So this is what the book is about. Is Morris, who's this kid who loves school and loves dress up time and loves painting time, just loves every aspect of activities at school. And suddenly, when that includes an interest in this tangerine dress, right, suddenly it's a problem for people, for his other classmates, even for
Right.
there's friction
Mhm.
even with the adults, which is something that I got to explore in the adaptation. Because yeah, it's really cool. Adapting means you get to for me anyway, it means like how do I honor and like communicate and translate the heart of this message, and capture the same feel. I want to evoke as a playwright the same feelings and world that the book evokes in me as a reader. Um, and also you get to kind of do a little bit more, right? Because you have a little bit more room to work with outside of just a few pages, which are so powerful, right? Children's books do a lot, right? They seem simple, and that's their power, is that with just some simple language and some stunning images, so much is communicated. And so then part of my work as the playwright was, okay, how do I expand on, capture that, but also amplify that, right, with something like the stage. And of course, our amazing director and creative teams and the designers that really made it all come to life. Like, I just kind of got to be like, I think like this, and write my little play roadmap for them, and then they like make it happen. So, for example, there's not a teacher in the book, right? It's very much through Morris's perspective. So you're kind of just with him every day of the week as he's dealing with the sort of pushback on his interest in this dress. And it was cool because in the play, I got to kind of introduce the teacher as a character. Because again, when I think about like works being for all ages, right? I think adults coming to the show can also should allow themselves to connect with the children and their own inner child, but also see an adult in the story with compassion, but also with friction, like navigating, like how as a teacher, how does the teacher in that classroom support Morris, but also hold all of the students in that space, and that was really cool too. And that was really helped by like working with my director and with the workshops with the kids, which I would love to. Yeah, I could get into a whole thing with those kids that I got to work with in Minneapolis. But yeah, that's a little bit about the book. And for me, I felt it was actually my first ever commission. I think I might have just mentioned that. So it was really cool because I was just reached out to by a few theaters that came together. And it was one of those things where like, I don't think I even remembered to ask in my excitement, like, how did you even know about me? But like, yes, I absolutely resonate with this project and I would be honored to work with y'all on it. But the Children's Theater Company in Minneapolis and the Chicago Children's Theater and the Rose Theater in Omaha came together and reached out to me to commission me for the work. And so that was also cool. Like that was a big first where I was like, oh, you want me to do it? And you want to pay me and everything? Like fire.
Right.
Yeah.
In real money?
Right. Like pause,
Right.
not exposure dollars.
Oh,
If we actually had a nickel
Yeah.
right.
for all the exposure.
Because it's a good thing that you can pay your rent in exposure.
Right. Yeah, I heard landlords are taking that
Yeah.
these days. Yeah.
You know?
Not ever once.
Nope.
Bitcoin and exposure.
Yeah.
Nope. Neither.
And I love that Children's Theater Company, which is the company that produced the play, they won a bunch of awards for this season. So you're in like fabulous company, as are they with you.
Oh.
So congratulations all around and shout out to them.
Yeah.
I'm wondering about the feedback. Did you either get some or hear about some where, somebody kind of, I went because my kid wanted to, but I was transformed. Did you get any of that or hear any of that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that in particular, I didn't get to hear directly, although that would be so special. And I like to think that happened there, but I definitely being able to be in Minneapolis for the, because yeah, we had the world premiere at Children's Theater Company, and yes, just want to also snaps to them and their awards and their support of the work. And they're like I think the biggest children's theater in the country, in the US. So huge, again, part of the honor and the excitement to work with them because they've just been holding it down and investing in this particular area for such a long time. But I was able to be there for the world premiere, and we had a double opening because we had two different casts of stellar young children and our one amazing adult actor. And it was really special to get to like not only be in the audience with folks, right, as they're watching, and kind of incognito too, because they like most of them, right, are not going to be aware that the playwright's like sitting right there. But I was like sitting just like next to kids, and so I'm getting to, and they don't know that it's me, so I'm just like getting to like hear their honest response and reaction to the show. So that was really fun. And
this person's right on the edge of their seat. Oh my God.
Right. I was just like, oh my God. And then it was cute because at one point, like, a parent next to me, was looking at the program and kind of like, it was like, oh my God. And like said hello and introduced me to their kid and was like, this is the writer of the show. It was like so sweet. But I definitely remember being really impacted, of course, by like getting to like witness the children engaging with and reacting to the play. But in terms of the adults too, like, I wasn't like emotionally prepared, even though, of course, because I'm one of these adults, but like there were also just like queer and trans adults who came to me after the show and were like, you don't know how much I needed this to see this today. Like this healed something in me.
Sure.
And like, that was really powerful. But I love what you're posing too of like perhaps the adult who like didn't really know what they were walking into or just were like, oh, my kid wants to see this or like, saw a flyer. And then maybe, yeah, walked out transformed. I didn't get to hear any personal accounts of that, but I like to think that happened as well. Because I think that's a really magical thing that can happen in a theater and in the Trojan horse also of a kid's story, right? Where you're just like, oh, I'm here for the
Right. And
cool colors.
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Many years ago, good Lord, in the 90s, early 90s, I was in Jeffrey local theater, and a family member was in the audience and came to me after crying because it was their first exposure to queer storytelling, right? And I just think when we tell our own stories, it hits different. It's representation matters. It matters. It matters. It matters. It matters. Whether we're talking about the actors portraying and inhabiting roles, but the playwright, the folks writing the book, and the people directing the action, it matters in the ways we tell our own stories. Because, cishets tend to think these are universal stories. They're not. I mean, and while there are parts of the themes that we can talk about that are universal, no, they aren't. There are specifically queer stories, that so much could come out of a dress, a piece of cloth.
Right.
That's a queer story.
I like how you said it was a piece of fabric that just so happened to take the form of what we call a dress.
Right. I love that. I mean, God, keep doing it.
Yeah.
Please keep doing it.
I know I need it. I really appreciate it. Like I received that with like a really full heart because it does go a long way, right? Just like as an audience member walking into a show like that for the first time and having that like awakened or encouraged or held in you for the first time is such a big deal. And as the artist sharing that, right, to actually be received in that way does the same sort of healing work. And so it really it means a lot because it's easy for me to kind of get lost in the sauce or like in the day-to-day grind or like in my sort of little cave, my introvert cave, and so then every time I'm able to whether I'm receiving an art or putting out my own art, because I think we all should be doing both to some extent, because I think we all have creative energy and a creative spirit. So it's just I think it's really nourishing, and I think it's as important to our wellness as a lot of other things that we kind of take for granted as being like, of course we do that to take care of ourselves. And I'm like, no, we need to express. Like we need to express, or like it has to go somewhere, and we need to connect. So yeah. And then it's just a dress. I'm like, that's also like the culturalness of that, where I'm like, we call that a dress now. Sorry, I'm just like just jumping in, but
right.
I just want to say, like, because I'm like, even what's called a dress is so culturally and time specific, right? Where you are in the world, what time you are in the world, different combinations of fabric are going to have different social meaning, I guess, is the thing. So I like to at least poke at that, right? And be like, nothing is actually like set in stone into this natural way. Like these are all like we create these cultures and these social setups, and that's powerful because that means that we can change them when we see that they're not serving us or that they're causing harm.
Yeah. Ooh, that part. Can we hurry up and get to that part?
Right. I know. I'm like, let's do more of that.
It shouldn't be a subversive thing. It really shouldn't. Because there's so much art being made talking to trans and non-binary kids, talking about, directly to the kids who don't fit in and saying, it's cool. I Wear Pink comes to mind. The song I Wear Pink. We had put together a children's playlist of family music from all these amazing queer artists and folks just kind of reaching out to say, you're not weird. You're okay. And you exist. Right. Because that's what it comes down to. So, this might have been a children's theater piece, but I'm certain it resonated with adults because we didn't have that. So many of us just never had that. And we need it now more than ever. We need it.
Both intentionally and unintentionally timely as well.
Right.
Right.
Right. I don't think you set out to be political in that particular piece, but it was.
Right. I mean, that's what's wild about kind of existing in any sort of marginalized or multiply marginalized, right, experience is that yeah, at the end of the day, kind of anything, just expressing yourself becomes this sort of, can be seen as political or take on a political impact, which I think makes it, because I'm like, yeah, it's such a loaded word, right? Like the political or the politics of it all. And I still am like, what do we mean by that? I'm like, what do I mean by that when I
Right.
use that word? Because I'm just like, yo, we're just at the end of the day, I'm just like, we are in this mess together. We're like on this planet in this, place, and like we affect each other. And then there's like the capital P politics, I guess I say sometimes, of like, the people in power behind
Right.
closed doors, and that's its own thing. That is also not kind of on another planet, right? We are still able to influence that as well, and I think it's important for artists to think about that, even if they're not setting it. Yeah, because I don't think any of us set out to be like, this is this place for the White House, or whatever the capital P politics are. But it's like, I think it's important to be aware of that and consider and pay attention to how it's received, how it's impacted, what the cultural moment is, because we're in conversation with all of that. But yeah, listen, the spiral of time, right, where we like, and it becomes timely yet again because we're still having to fight this fight, or we're still having to, make some basic
Oh, yeah.
declarations of we exist,
Our lives and our existence are not political. They've been politicized.
Right.
And I think it's an important thing to always mention. Like, my life is not political. It's kind of boring. You've made me political. I didn't choose that. They keep calling us to a fight we did not call.
Right. I think about this with my friends all the time. I'm like, we're really just trying to vibe. Like, I feel like, when I think about like my entire trans and queer community, I'm like, what we like to do? Hang out with our cats and play board games.
Right.
And, but then, yeah, we are politicized. We are politicized simply because we dare to try to be who we feel we are at any given moment and express that, which is just nuts. But
And how dare you?
how dare you? Right.
Or something. Well, I'm old enough, to have seen this happen before to various communities, until it's no longer expedient, and then it stops.
Right.
And we move on to the next one, or we try. And I really, in some ways, think we were the last bastion of who haven't we picked on, and who is a small enough percentage of the population that we can target them. We can create doubt around their existence, and that's what's happened. But I think, what finally comes out of this is much greater awareness, much greater trans awareness, much greater queer awareness that, we're all not one thing in this world. We exist. So I'm ever hopeful that everybody's just going to relax, but I'm an optimist. I couldn't do anything that I do. So
Fingers crossed, Joe.
right. So what's next for you? What are you working on right now?
Ooh, well, it's funny that earlier you mentioned this sort of ancestral time existence, because I was thinking about like, what
Yes.
has changed in my life since October. And it's interesting because on paper it doesn't feel like very much, although I was just mentioning that I am getting ready to like move across the country. I'm from New York City. I've been living here my 3 decades, and I am finally like kind of making this big shift. And the reason I bring that up as sort of like what's next is because I feel like what has been really exciting about also getting to work on Morris and spend all that time in Minneapolis, also like spend time in other places that's not, my beloved but also hectic hometown, is been really nourishing, and also has been it's like the play, the award is like, these are like feel like affirmations from the universe to continue this work, and particularly to like deepen that relationship to theater for young audiences and write that children's book that I want to write, that novel I want to write. So I'm actually, part of why I'm making this big move is to create more time and space for myself to really pour into my work. And I've got a bunch of the array of half complete projects that I feel like every artist is surrounded by, right? And so I'm really excited to be moving into this next stage. I'm going to move to the desert and pay a lot less rent for a lot more space, and really be able to kind of devote myself a little more to that work. I'm still working on Julian, which I had mentioned was really exciting. I think we're in production. I'll just always mention it because you got to keep bringing it up since it takes years, especially with animation. So I think we're
Right.
slated for a 2025 or early 2026 release, where we got to do the voice acting in Toronto a couple months ago. That was really fun, and made me kind of be like, oh, maybe I also want to do voice acting. We're just picking up hobbies, picking up ways for how do we have fun and
Hey.
express ourselves and contribute, right, our stories in whatever sphere. So that's been really fun. I'm working on a new screenplay as well with a asexual protagonist, which I'm really excited in terms of queer story and work. I'm someone who identified as being on the A spectrum ever since high school, really, and it's just been this like slow thing that I've like, you kind of I don't know this. I feel like every relationship to identity or to queerness is so unique. But I do think that they're all very like, because we're humans and we're always growing and changing and evolving, it's always this like interesting flow with our identities and understanding them in new ways as we get older too. So I'm really excited about working on that project, because I've been seeing more sort of like ace or A spectrum stories bit by bit in, for example, like YA television and even some YA like books and stuff, which I love to read as well. But still, it's been cool to see it at all, because it's one of those things where, like, as a teenager, I had to find that like world on Tumblr and be like, "Oh, are these the words for like how I relate to my sexuality?" And so it's really cool to see it
Can we
actually
take
on
a second
TV.
and thank goodness for Tumblr?
Yes, it's like, listen, it's like every other platform where you're like, there's some corners, but that's like, I'm so grateful. Like, I was on Tumblr for all of high school, and there's a lot, and it's still going. I still be on Tumblr sometimes. Be like, how y'all doing in here? And it was definitely where I came across stuff like demisexuality or asexuality. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, really cool to see it see it a little bit more in the media. And of course, it's still the smallest, the not the B plot or the C plot. It's like the G plot. You know what I mean? And there's like, you're lucky if the all the fans who make edits of TV shows. It's like the ace character. By the time you make a whole edit of every moment they've had on screen, you've got maybe a 15-second video. So, and I'm also the thing where it's like, I'm grateful for it. And okay, if I have a gripe, right? If I'm like not enough, then let me be a part of the solution. And so I'm really excited about that project and really having an ace protagonist exploring their queerness and their relationship to sex and sexuality at the center of a story. So that's in the works. I'm like really trying to cook up some of these books, and also really excited for what happens with Morris, right? We premiered in Minneapolis, and we're still going to be going up in Chicago and Omaha, like I mentioned. So I'm really looking forward to those productions and to see how
That's amazing.
yeah, those.
I'm on tour.
Yeah, right. I'm like, let's go and let's keep going. I'm like, we had a little ditty in Atlanta for the TYA conference, the for Theater for Young Audiences conference that happened in the winter, and so I wasn't able to attend, but I was really excited that it was happening. Now it's available for licensing. So, like I mentioned, to me, seeing my work in schools and especially in public schools is like this huge heart work for me, because I'm like, that's where I was as a kid, and that's where I needed the work to get to so that I could access it, right? Because I wasn't in a family that was going to shows. I think my first like theater, like going to a theater, right, for it was like, I think I saw Wicked on Broadway at like 17 or 18 years old, and it was like this big deal. But mind you, I'd been interested in theater since middle school, but there was no theater program in my school. There was no community theater that I knew of. There was just not a thing. And so even thinking about access in that way, I'm really passionate about, okay, how accessible can my work be in terms of, who can reach it, who can afford it. So I'm calling that in. If y'all are manifestors and want to put up a little prayer for me, I'm like, I want to be able to have that work really be accessible to for free or affordable, as many young people as it can, because they're out there. All the little young queer children are out there waiting to be affirmed in that way. And so I want to keep it true. So those are some things. But right now I'm really focusing on this move so that I can kind of create my little desert writer cave and really get into it. Because it's a lot being in New York City, right? It's like a kind of the center of the empire a little bit, one of the centers. And there's a lot of pros to that, and also a lot of like the underbelly of it, where it's expensive, it's hectic, it's not necessary. It's like, very high density population, which is a lot for an ongoing pandemic, which is not being talked about anymore. So there's like all these layers, but I'm really looking forward
Everyone's
to
trying to get there at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm looking forward to that, and that's a little bit of what I'm sort of what's cooking in the kitchen.
Did you just say, what is a 180 to New York City?
Yeah.
The desert.
Exactly.
Is that what happened?
A little bit. Well, I was like, I had some really beautiful experiences in the desert in the Southwest with friends over the years, and I'm moving with a friend because I've always lived with friends, and I'm like, everyone's like, oh, that like camp or like college that vibe. I'm like, I want that forever. So I think it's like a little factors of like, I love the desert. Yeah, right. The emptiness, the sky. It is the opposite, right? Coming from the skyscraper city to go into just mountain and sky. I'm really excited for how that will also nourish my creative self and practice.
Right.
I can see once your brain gets a taste of like quiet and room to breathe and flex, the things that's going to come out of you.
Oh, yes, thank you. I received that, and that's what I'm hoping for. That's the big intention, one of the biggest intentions behind the move. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, the connection to nature is important, especially for creatives, and I don't think we recognize that enough. Like we spent a very long time in the city, and we live just about 20 minutes outside the city, but it's a different world. In the day to day, like it's green here and it's quiet here, and it's but I think creativity, it's much easier for it to flow when you give your soul that time and space to do so. One of the other themes that you had talked about last time was living, essentially, these are my words, but living in community and the importance of community. And when you said living with friends, you reminded me of that, because we're not meant to do this alone, right?
Yeah.
I'd like you to expand on that a little bit, because I loved that notion, because I think we've all but abandoned it as people, and it's such a critical part of maintaining our humanity. How's that?
Yeah. How's that? That's it. That's the money. Like, yeah, I think I say that all the time, sometimes as just like an affirmation to my friends when they're having a struggle moment or they're beating themselves up for not somehow managing to be spinning 10 plates at once. And I'm like, homie, we are not meant to do this alone. You need me to come over and sit with you while you fold your laundry? I got you. And so that's what I think about with community is like you said, the day to day also of like, there's so much that we have to do in the day to day that can be easy to think of as like an inconvenience. I think about it all the time when I gotta do laundry or feed myself 3 times in the day. I'm like, oh my God, again. Like, you're like, what is this? But then you're like, oh wait,
Right.
this is the mundane of life and you can't escape it, right? Like and thinking about, at least for myself, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't necessarily want to escape it entirely, but I definitely understand wanting to ease the load of it. And I think that's where community is in a very tangible way. I think that word can be a little bit nebulous or loaded too, right? For community, especially when capitalism co-ops a term. Good luck. So once capitalism's got its nails in it, so people can really hear that word and it might be like, oh well, it might bring up for them like, I've never been able to find a community that's really there, or it's used to signal something to buy something, right? But what does it actually mean? And so I think it actually means that thing of like that web that you have around you that just helps you get through the day to day and eases the load of it to create more room for just getting to exist and express and connect and enjoy the fact that we're alive on this planet somehow. I always say, I'm like, not to be dramatic, but like, how are we? And I don't need the answer, right? To like, how do we exist? Because I'm like, that can drive you crazy, or maybe just really interest you in, I don't know, philosophy or theology or something. But for me, I'm like, I don't need the answer. I just need, it humbles me to be like, yo, I really don't know how on earth, literally, like we happen to exist, right? In this solar system. And we're like, as far as we know, in these 9 planets, only we take this form and they walk around like this. And it's so silly and wasteful that it's going to so much war, is what I always feel. I'm like, it's like those memes. You saw it on Tumblr first, probably. Like, we really should be here just, grazing around, feeding each other grapes. Like, that should be the vibe. And instead, we're like, we're hustling to pay rent to a land, like, it's wild stuff. And so I always think, like, no, materially, like, really, literally, having community and being specific with what that means to you. And it could literally just be like 3 other people. It could even be 1 other person sometimes. It's my cat sometimes. There's one right behind me. And it's like that, just that other living being or beings that help bring each other some ease into this, with the cooking, with the laundry, with the writing together or making crafts together. So I think about it in that way where I'm like, that's what I want for the rest of my life, and that should look different for each person too, in each place. I think a lot about community, and when we're talking about nature, also the land that you're on is part of your community. So when we're talking about being in the city versus being in a more, sort of less developed or less urban place where we can be with the trees and the grass and even the bugs. I'm not a bug guy, but I really have been trying to be like, y'all, thank you for your service. Like, we need you too. Like, but don't touch me. But like, thank you. So I think about that where I'm like, those are also all my kin. So being with the trees, being with the river. I love rivers very much, and I live by the Harlem River now, and I'm gonna soon be living near the Rio Grande. So I think about the river as a community member, right? And of course it is, because it's what allows me to have water to drink and air from the trees and all these things. And so cities are valuable in connecting us to other humans, because there's more humans, and you can find your other queers there, and you can, really have some beautiful experiences, and balancing that with like, okay, what about our relationships to non-human life? And so I think about that for community too. It's like the people and also non-human life around you that makes your life possible. And actually just acknowledging that, because I think this idea, I understand it, right? That we can be a little disillusioned, or we can be like, oh, we've had trust issues, right? We've experienced harm or hurt before in community, or with, had falling out. And that's all very real, which was a whole other tangent I could go into about working on our conflict resolution and communication skills as people. But
Sure.
I like understand it. I'm also like, y'all, at the end of the day, we cannot pretend that we don't need each other. Everything that is around me right now, everything I had for breakfast, other people had to grow it, plant it, gather it, ship it to me, stock it at the grocery store. Like, I think about that. Not every single time, although a little bit. I'm like, when I try to have at least a quick moment of like, wow, how did this plate of food even get in front of me that I'm complaining about, right? Because I'm like, damn, I gotta make another meal. Like, I'm hungry again, and I gotta cook for myself. So anyway, see, I could just go all over with it, but that's what a little bit about what community means to me. Yeah.
I love that. No, I love that. And it's, what came to my mind is, the political idea of libertarianism, which is the exact opposite of that. Like, I can exist on my own. I don't need anyone. I just want to fulfill my own destiny. Okay, but don't use our roads. It's fine. Don't go to the hospital. Don't use any of the things that are collective. I can see you saying, the word has been co-opted. It has. I think I'm just searching for the right one. Is it connection? Is it family? Because most of the family that we have around are chosen at this point in our lives. We're surrounded by wonderful people. They are a chosen family, not so much blood. And I think about that. I work with a lot of trans people, and so many of them, I'm like, you have to have trans friends. You have to. You've got to have people in life that you have shorthand with. So you are not explaining your existence to every human being in your orbit.
Right.
And then they're like, Martha was right. Because it's for any of us to peacefully exist, we've got to find
your tribe.
Find your tribe. Find your people. And yeah, there can be conflict. And yeah, especially if you get a bunch of queers together, there's always going to be drama, because that's what we do.
Better than anybody else.
Yes. Some of it can be toxic and need to be dealt with. And a lot of it is, I liken us to the land of broken toys, like, and we bump up against each other's wounds. And insecurities, and that's they've all been installed pretty much.
And sometimes all you really need is just another person that you can look at and just go, don't you ever like just hate it here sometimes? Yeah, me too. Yeah, okay. And then you're good. You had the
right.
It's not just me.
I think of like a vent or like a pressure cooker. Like that's part of the expression too. It's like sometimes you just gotta let it out. And that's enough. And it's not always. Sometimes it's like, you're saying, Martha, sometimes it's bigger and we got to like kind of tackle it. But sometimes you're just like, I just need to like complain a little bit, or to just sigh, have a big sigh. And then having that big sigh with someone else, you feel it. You feel the difference of having it just someone next to you in it with you, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you for seeing me in this moment. That's all I needed. There's, that idea of holding space with one another. I think we undervalue that often. That sometimes that's all We need somebody to listen, somebody to hear us just moan,
Right.
and then let it be.
Sometimes you just need to be reassured that it's all not just happening to me.
Yes, and that you're not making it up, right?
Right.
I don't know about y'all, but for me, I can be a little too quick to be like, nah, you're actually bugging about that. And I'm like, not me gaslighting myself. Like, so to have the friend or the community
Right.
to be like, no, I see it too. I see it too, and it's not right. It really goes a long way. Like we're saying, it's very, there's a soothing there that can't be underestimated. The impact of, even as we're trying to also change our
Yeah.
conditions, right, and create a better world for each other and create these pockets of utopia, perhaps, even if the whole thing will never really happen. As we're in that process, yeah, we
Ooh,
definitely
that
just
sounds
need
like
to
a title.
be right. Ooh, let me write that down. Let's write somebody, anybody. It's up for grabs.
Pockets of
The
Utopia.
public commons,
Well,
Creative Commons.
yeah, or perhaps at least pockets, where peace is possible.
Okay,
Where peace
alliteration.
is prioritized.
Yes.
I know, right?
Yeah, where peace is prioritized.
I love that.
Because that's, I'm old enough to not really care if I'm right or I'm the villain in your story. But I'm going to maintain my own peace, and I'm really good at boundaries. So, hey,
Yes.
yeah, these are the things we learn and cultivate, and as we sort of bump against each other and try to figure out this whole thing. It's interesting, when you talked about, you used the word miracles. And I remember talking to a friend who was an avowed atheist at one point, and I said, I'm there with you in a lot of this, but how do you account for, I don't know, the energy, the connectivity, the people who show up in our lives at exactly the right time? Be they teachers, be it in the form of opportunity, uh, be it bread when we're hungry, whatever way you want to look at that is, time and time again in my life that has happened and continues to happen. And I said, how do you account for that? And he said, wait a minute. I never said there were no miracles. I said it's all a miracle.
Wow. Exactly.
And that's what I heard you say.
Yes, that's so beautiful. Because that's what I think about when I'm like, I'm someone who was raised Catholic, right? So, and me and my Catholic friends.
Same.
Yeah, okay. So you see over there, we already got the jokes of like we can just kiki about the shame, the guilt, the chaos of it all. And I'm always like, yeah, I'm gonna be recovering from that for the rest of my life, type stuff. But I think if I think about, and nonetheless, right, I love my mother very much, and so even though we have our differences, she's very, very Catholic and very faithful, and I try to connect with her on whatever's underneath the words and the whatever theatrics of the organized religion. Because I think the reason I bring that up is because I'm like, right, what happens when we can just not beef so much about being right about how we ended up here or why or like who did it and da da da. Because I'm like, listen, everyone's gonna have their own. You're never gonna get everyone to have the same opinion on that or the same perspective, and we shouldn't, because what happens if we just are able to more so, even if we have different creation stories or sort of rule books, that some people like rule book. I don't like a rule book, but right, if people want that, fine. But what happens when we can actually just more so come together and be in awe of the fact that we're here at all, and be, because I'm like, I think it's interesting with like, I love thinking about like faith and the cosmos and creation and how the heck, but I just like thinking about it. And I just like, for me, that's like enough, just being like, wow, cool. Like, it's cool. What I'm like, no one can say it's not freaking cool. I was one of those kids who on Tumblr would see pictures of the Northern Lights and be like, oh my God, I have to go to Iceland. Like how? And then that happened. I think recently people in Minneapolis or Minnesota were able to see the Northern Lights because of some weird polar storm. Like, what is happening? But that, I was like, wow, that's amazing. And I think of that as like just like a classic, like, wow, we don't have to know how or agree on why we think it exists, but like we can totally agree that it's freaking cool, right? So I think about, that's why you make me think of like, what happens if we actually live in that space together?
Yeah, indeed. And that's also the space of mind your own business, because they have to kind of go hand in hand, right?
Right, because like we're a speck on a speck of a speck in this infinite cosmos, and you're worried about what I'm doing.
Right? Exactly.
I had a conversation a while back with a former colleague, whose faith was very important to them. And, it was this conversation where they were kind of explaining to me, hey, I didn't write the theology. In other words, I feel the way I feel about you. And I said, I keep existing no matter what you think of me, right? No matter what you think your God thinks of me, I'm going to be right here.
Right.
Living my little trans life, doing my little trans job. I'm going to be doing all these things, irrespective of whether or not you think I have a right to exist. And as a matter of fact, I have the same right to exist that you do because I'm here breathing at the same time.
We're
as you.
already here. We're already here.
Yeah, so be well. But
Yeah. Yeah. But the way you said about
It's
the
almost like a
boundaries and the sort of that stuff, I think is really, to connect it sort of, I think, really important. I'm working on that. I love it. I'm inspired by you. I'm like been working on that, the boundaries and the sort of like, that's how we end up being able to be with each other, even with all our broken toy wounds, right? Is working on those boundaries and on communicating them and parsing out, disentangling the projection from, hey, wait, we're all just here. We already exist. Yeah, that's so interesting with, the former colleague and the being like, I'm already here. I already exist. Like you can wax poetic about what you think God is and the care, but I'm already. How do you like? Why don't we work the other direction and say, hey, we all exist already, and look at all the ways in which we can exist and be and express and connect as humans, and go off of that versus the sort of very rigid mindset that comes on. Yeah, again, wanting to like fossilize a singular human experience, and I'm like, it's impossible, and we shouldn't want to do it because part of the glory is that look at us go, like we are so abundant and so multiplicitous. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I was thinking about, we talked about this last time, the idea of the door is always unlocked.
That was another thing I wrote down, by the way, because that hit.
Yeah.
Right. That idea, it's unlocked. It might not be open.
Right.
You might have to knock.
Right. So we allow the space for people to grow and change, and the hope that they will, but they have to do the work and meet us halfway because we're already here.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, we both sit on the board of our local PFLAG. I facilitate monthly meetings in person, and it takes some parents a while to get it, to understand, and it's a hard thing to sit and tell parents what you're mourning right now is your idea of another human being's life. The person is still right here, but you had plans that actually you didn't consult them on. There was just this little mistake in identifying them at birth, and they're correcting that. And you are mourning everything that existed in your head. And if we can just put that over here for a moment and honor the person right in front of us, we can grow. But then conversely, I work with the trans young people who, those scars leave a mark. Those words leave a mark. And so much trust can be broken, and trying to repair it takes a lot of grace and a lot of space and a lot of time sometimes. So yeah, it's all kind of wild. Watching people.
Yeah. I mean, and it's
interact.
Yes. It's so, and then that's where we go back to like the story and the art, because that's how we sort of try to make sense of it. Because there's so much so much beauty and there's so much pain, always true at the same time. And I think we're all existing in that, trying to make some sense of it, each of us crafting our own versions of narrative around it. And I think, when we talked about having grace and making that space, and sorry, my cats are chatty in the background. Clearly have feelings on it as well. But I think it's that door. The door is the boundary, for example, right? It's like literally, right? It's like sort of a visual or metaphor for the boundary of like, look, it's not it's not locked, it's not deadbolted. I didn't bar the door, but it is a y'all. Sorry. That was so extra. They're usually so chill. My bad. Okay. Anyway, the cats are feeling like, look at that. They're beefing, and then they're gonna have to work that out. Okay, they're gonna have to have some grace for each other, and figure
There
it
you
out.
go.
Get to it as siblings. But yeah, I think that's tough.
There's
Like
a lot.
with the with the parents and the children. And I remember talking about this with Charles last time, where it's like that grace is. I'm not gonna tell someone else what that grace looks like. I can only speak for my
Right.
boundary, my door, my feelings, my wounds. So yeah, I mean, working with folks who have wounds in their relations over something like queerness or transness is going to be deep in individual work, and it's like I'm not going to tell someone else what their boundary is with a parent, or what's too much, what their line
You
is crossed. So I'm like, that's for each of us to figure out. But I do think we have to
right.
find what that spot is for us. What is the amount of grace that we can have? I'm not going to tell someone how much grace they should have, because I didn't live their life. I didn't experience what they might have
Exactly.
experienced. I don't know the depth of their wound. But I think we can have that conversation of like, okay, what is possible? Where's the boundary? And then how much of the can we stay open hearted to each other? Because that's what we're trying to protect, I think, at the end of the day. Because I'm like, of course, we might be hardened and have our things because things happen, and that's valid. And also, I think we can recognize ultimately we don't want to be so closed off from each other that we can't have that community that holds and supports and sees each other and can just be like, wow, we're in this,
Right.
together. So it's a dance for everyone. But yeah, I do think I that's something for myself that I really try to keep central, that you're always kind of recalibrating around. It's like, okay, if at the end of the day I still want to have an open heart, how do I protect it just enough to stay open?
Well, exactly. And that's, grace is something we determine for ourselves.
Yeah.
For me, I'm talking about allowing for the possibility that others will educate themselves, or the possibility that they will look for common ground where they haven't seen any. Those kinds of things, as opposed to, you can hurt me as many times as you want and I'll be right here. That's not what I mean at all. That's
Exactly.
not what I mean. But and you can keep your happy ass over there until and unless we can have a better place. But in some ways I think I've asked for a lot of grace from the people around me, certainly the people who were around me through my transition. I asked for some time, I asked for some space and understanding, and I think that was a transaction. I had to offer some too. It wasn't so, I mean, this was a declaration. There wasn't a negotiation involved, but there was, you get a little time to figure out what this means for you. You get a little time, you get a little time to mess up my name, little time. Didn't happen much at all. Not with the people who love me. But that's, I think we all are figuring that part out. That idea that we're all just walking each other home. I've been sitting with that for a long time.
Ooh,
Wow.
we're all just walking each other home. That
Yeah.
was nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Look at
I
you.
love that. Yes. See, we're all wordsmiths here, visionaries. No, it's so true. And I think whenever I find myself struggling a little bit to give a little grace or
Mhm.
have a little compassion, I think, yeah, the first thing I do is be like, okay, go look in the mirror. Or have you always been a perfect little, like no one has? I'm like, have I not needed
Right.
grace? Have I not said things as a teenager or even last week that I'm like, well, I have since learned new information and I feel differently now.
Yes.
And that is so powerful, I think, to be like, yo, we can change our minds. We can grow. We actually, the fact that we have to give each other permission to do that, again, because the sort of fixation of like having a fixed identity, right? There's even within queerness, for example, or trans identity, where, like I was saying earlier, it
Yeah.
might evolve, right? You might be using one term and then continue to live your life and relate to other people and do your own little soul searching and be like, actually, this is what feels good to me. And then that might feel good to you for the rest of your life, or it might change in another year. And I think about that as a very sort of like, I'm a very like fluid kind of even in high school when I started coming into my queerness more consciously, I was very like, I like the general term. I'm like, I don't know about these super specific labels, because what if I don't, I was very like, oh, I don't know if I need a label. I just need to have a community or a sense of the thing that told me that, like, you're not, evil or wrong or the devil for being this way.
Right.
But it's always been
Right.
very fluid, right? A lot of my identities feel that way, where I think of myself as like, non-binary or gender fluid, gender non-conforming, two-spirit, all these terms that I feel like on any given day one might resonate more, or like they're all true at the same time. So just to say, like, we are all always changing anyway. And what happens when we embrace that and embrace that for other people as well, and be like, hey, and be curious, right? The curiosity. When I think about that with parents, for example, confronting, confronting themselves really when they are coming to terms with like a trans child, and it's like, what happens if you're curious about it? What happens if you're so excited about like getting to know who your child is? But then we have to get into how most parents in general are not necessarily on that wave. We need to be
Well,
raising families a little differently, treating children a little differently. A lot of children, I feel like, definitely um, growing up, is like, even our school systems, the way they're structured, is very much about control and about
Oh yeah.
oh, there's that New York City siren. About control and about depositing information into their little heads, right? Which is very like Paulo Freire talks about in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, and talking about education and being like, it's not a banking model. We don't just put little coins into the kids' heads and then, but a lot of adults are approaching children that way, or younger people that way, instead of with the curiosity of like, this is a whole person, just like I was a whole person when I was that age. So
right,
yeah.
right. The thing I'm thinking about is one of the classes I took a year or two ago. I can't even remember what the class was, but I remembered this. One of the instructors said, "Stay curious, because curiosity keeps us out of judgment." And I've used that line 100 times. When we approach one another with curiosity, when we approach new information with curiosity instead of judgment, instead of trying to build it a box and say, what does this mean? I need to know more. I want to know more. It changes our approach to life. It changes our approach to life. Stay curious. I love, that's so important.
And that's why we need to have the arts in education, because we need the kids to have their brains wired in such a way that introspection is good, that self-expression is good, that figuring out that there's not just one way to be, and none of it's wrong, is good. We need that, and they're trying to, like, that's the first thing it always goes.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Which is just, I'm gonna continue to spend my lifetime like, how can I pour into that, where even as it's systemically being, sucked dry, like, how can we pour into that? Because I think if I'm like trying to, like, my brain's now trying to do like the mega web of like connecting all these like beautiful themes we're talking about, and I think when we're talking about, like, for example, community and boundaries, those are two things that can help us stay curious. Because I'm like, it's, what defaults us to judgment is fear, or not being safe, not feeling safe, not
Yeah.
feeling alone. Feel like, of course, that when you're in that state, you're gonna default to judgment. And I don't even like, the brain is gonna do that, right? That's like the survival mechanism sort of kicking in. Because I'm like, there's a reason our brains are capable of judgment. They're making judgments all the time to keep us safe. But then when we get into that territory of judging as the immediate, always first reaction to things that are different or new to us, that's starting to then hinder our growth and our capacity to like build together. And I think what we were talking about before is what makes us stronger, to be able to be curious instead of judgmental. When we encounter something new, if you have the community, if you have the support, if you have that crew that holds you down, and you have your own boundaries, and that's all stuff that we're always working on. You never like arrive at that, right? But if you're working on that stuff, that's what I try to do in order to keep my curiosity alive. It's like, okay, if I can have the safety of my close, my chosen family, my family, and I can be working on my own boundaries and self-understanding, that makes me more capable of being curious. And then thinking of like how art in schools and in community buildings and community centers and in backyards makes that possible. I think of like, yeah, because I didn't have access to really any like fancy particular theater or anything. I was basically just an improv club in high school. And shout out to my English teacher, Mr. Rader, who was that, that teacher who knows what time he got there in the morning. And then he stayed until 4 so that we could be 14 years old in his classroom doing the most ridiculous improv scene, And so and they made an impact, right? I haven't talked to Mr. Rader since I was probably 20, but like I mentioned him on interviews or like my other English teachers because it had an impact. And then I got to be that teacher doing improv in New York City public high schools. And that's a place where it's all day long they're being told, memorize this answer. There's a right and a wrong. Here's the stress, the stress, the stress. Are you, okay, you're 12. Are you thinking about college? Like, that's what I'm seeing in these schools. And it's like, okay, these kids need a space where they get to come and there's none of that. There's literally no way to do it wrong unless you're causing harm. And then that's the conversation we talk about. And be like, okay, well, it's let's get into that, right? But there's no right or wrong answer with an improv scene, right? You're actually just practicing staying curious, being adaptable, having fun, all these really powerful things. And so, yeah, just emphasizing and agreeing with that, where it's like, we need that. And yeah, I just hope I get to be a part of bringing that.
And staying present, because improv requires that as well.
Right. Yeah, you actually can't script the whole story. If you try to anticipate, if you try to like enforce your own particular story or narrative, it's not going to go. That doesn't make you a fun improv partner. What makes you a fun improv partner is listening and responding, right? And being like, oh, we're building something together. And yeah, those tools are just like, they're so invaluable. But yeah, people see that, people with power or making decisions around money are like, oh, why do kids need an improv club for? And it's like, let me tell you why, actually.
But here's an idea for a story. Someone builds a time machine and goes back to find the person that invented money and shake him until he changes his mind.
Right. Actually just take him, just distract him for however long and be like, let's actually just go for a walk in the woods and enjoy that and not think about capitalism.
Right. And all of these themes also, tie together in doing trauma work, in helping folks to address trauma. Helping us to stay curious about our own minds, right? And the feelings that can come up and the triggers that can come up in life and being able to look at them with curiosity.
Totally.
And say, this isn't happening right now. So all of these themes,
right? I mean, it's not surprising. I'm like, I feel like it's not surprising that for me and I look around at all my queer and trans friends, it's like most of us are either like artists or social workers. And it's like that broken toy squad where we're like, we came together and we're like,
we're one of each.
Yes, exactly. And we need it all. And we're also in all these different titles or roles, but then we come together and break bread and have these conversations that cross these seemingly separate spaces, right? People aren't always thinking about social work. And people, of course, are. There's like art therapy and there's all these overlaps. But some people might think of them as these separate spheres. And I'm like, no, I think it's all these just different ways that we're trying to approach the soul question of like, how do we be okay? How do we, heal these wounds so that we can actually be building together and enjoying our lives and creating better conditions rather than always being in pain or coming from a trauma place or reacting to each other. So yeah, it's totally I love that you like brought that all together because I'm like, that's totally what I see all my queer and trans friends doing is like, okay, y'all, you know how we help the queer kids of the future is that we all get our shit together so that we can be coming from a more loving and curious place in general.
Yeah. Exactly. And the two words I want to leave you with are keep going.
Yes.
Please keep going.
Thank you, y'all.
You're doing amazing things.
Yes, I'm so grateful that there are artists like yourself out there doing the work, man.
Yep. So we're gonna tell the folks how to follow you. Yes, how to pay attention to what is going on in your life and in your work.
Yes.
Is there a website that does that? A blog?
Yes.
We got
the website's the best place because I, like perhaps many people, have a very contentious relationship with social media, so it's not a reliable place to find me. But my website, I do try to keep updated. It's just my name, juliany.taveras.com. I'm actually hoping to revamp it soon, so stay tuned, for fun. Because I also I'm like when the artist, I'm like I sometimes get geek out over a website redesign, some graphic design work. But I just want to say thank y'all so much, and thank you for that final affirmation. And I'm sending it back to y'all. Thank you for your artistry, your social work, your work with all our queer and trans people, creating spaces like this podcast. This is all part of it. I think we're making art right here, having our little chitty chat, just casually talking about the universe. So thank you so much. It really is such a pleasure. Like it, just like last time, I love all the places that we go in our conversation, and it's really nourishing.
Yeah, thank you. I love the joy that you bring.
And during this entire conversation, I've got our prosperity and abundance candle burning. So who knows what's going to come
Okay, yes,
that's right.
Slay. Oh my God, I love it. Yes, all the prosperity and abundance to both of you, to our cat, to the listeners.
Right.
Juliany, taveras, thank you so much for this time. You've been listening to Full Circle,
the podcast.
There you go. I missed it that time. Oh well. I'm Martha Madrigal.
And I am Charles Tyson Jr.
Thanks, Joe.
Full Circle is a Never Scared Productions podcast, hosted by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal, produced and edited by Never Scared, executive produced by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal. Our theme and music is by the Jingleberries. All names, pictures, music, audio, and video clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.